Welcome, class, to the second installment of the Hound of the Baskervilles, chapters 7 through 12. Chapters 1 through 6 establish the plot, while chapters 7 and 12 really start to get into the thick of things. And so a lot is revealed during chapters 7 through 12. The rest of the book, from 13 on, is just about how Holmes plans to catch the villains. So we're not going to go over after chapter 12. But 7 through 12 is where all the mystery is revealed. Chapter 7 starts off, it's called The Stapletons at Merripit House. It starts off with Watson and Sir Henry both discussing that they've been hearing a woman sobbing. And Barrymore, they bring Barrymore over and they ask him, hey, is your wife crying at night? And Barrymore completely denies that it was his wife, but the telltale signs are in the wife's eyes, and her eyes are swollen and red, and Watson doesn't believe Barrymore any farther than he could throw him. So Barrymore decides to check out his story. Watson tries to check out Barrymore's story to see if the telegram was actually delivered to Barrymore. Actually delivered into his hands. And so he goes to the postmaster and finds out that indeed the telegram was not delivered to Barrymore, at least into his hands, that it was given to his wife, and his wife supposedly handed the telegram back to Barrymore and also answered the telegram for her husband. On the way back from the postmaster, lo and behold, Mr. Stapleton runs up. And Mr. Stapleton is carrying a butterfly net because he's a naturalist and isn't infatuated with butterflies. And Stapleton begins to pry Watson about Sherlock Holmes, about Sir Henry, tells him about the convict, and starts talking about Charles Baskerville. And initially, Watson is really put off by, Stapleton inserting himself into the investigation and asking questions about Holmes. But Watson remains solid, doesn't give away any clues, and then Stapleton compliments Watson on his fortitude for not telling him anything, and pretty soon they seem to be pals. One of the things that Stapleton does is he really makes sure that he lets Watson know that he believes in the superstition. He believes in the Hound of the Baskerville being a curse and being something to be afraid of. He also lets him know how fond he was of Charles Baskerville, and that he hopes that Sir Henry will keep up the charity work that Charles is doing. He also starts talking about the strangeness and the mystery of the moor. And right on cue, we start hearing this sound, sad moaning, right? And eventually we see a pony drown in the Grimton Mire, which really just kind of puts the icing on the cake of how sorrowful and melancholy this place is. Stapleton says that the sad moan might be this bird called a bittern. And he also points out all these stone buildings in from the Neolithic man that are scattered around the moor as well. He also makes a note that in the Grimton Mire he can navigate it without any problem. And suddenly, Watson is alone. Stapleton sees a butterfly and he darts off after it with great agility. And lo and behold, right on cue, he meets the beautiful Miss Stapleton, the sister of Jack Stapleton. He notes that she looks nothing like her brother. She's more exotic looking. And she warns Henry. Well, she thinks it's Henry. She actually warns Watson, but she thinks it's Sir Henry. She says, "Go back to London, the curse is real, be scared, be scared." Eventually, Stapleton comes back and he's all flushed from chasing the butterfly. And she realizes that it's not Henry, and she apologizes. And they end up getting invited to should they invite him over to the Merripit house, and he goes, and he finds out that they were once schoolmasters, and that they worked at a school, and some tragedy fell over it, and so forth. And Stapleton really wants to show Watson his butterfly collection and hang out with him a little bit more. But Watson politely refuses, and he wants to get back to the Baskerville Hall so he can guard Sir Henry. What's interesting about this particular chapter is that we are introduced to the antagonists, the Stapletons, but the audience has zero clue as how they fit into being an antagonist. So we don't really even know they're antagonists yet. So they are our antagonists, or they're the against or the enemies of Sherlock Holmes and Watson, our heroes, but we don't know that yet. Chapters 8 through 10 consist of completely of the thoughts of Dr. Watson. So these chapters remove Sherlock Holmes from the mystery altogether. So all of a sudden Sherlock Holmes, he disappears for chapters 8 through 10. And the only thing we get to see is Dr. Watson, some people say, bumble his way through the investigation. But the purpose of 8 through 10 is to get inside the mind of Dr. Watson and to see Dr. Watson's need for approval with Sherlock Holmes. One might say he has a bromance with Sherlock Holmes, his mentor, and he really wants to triumph for Holmes, and in some ways over Holmes, solve something that maybe Sherlock could not solve himself. And so the first two chapters of this section, chapters 8 and 9, is the first report of Dr. Watson, then the second report of Dr. Watson, and then we get to see literally his mind in an extract from the diary of Dr. Watson in chapter 10. So in chapter 8, we see Dr. Watson as the primary protagonist and the narrator. So the first report, it starts off talking about the Notting Hill murderer, Selden, has fled. According to locals, they figure, hey, he hasn't killed any sheep out here. How would it be possible for him to have any food? He hasn't, busted into anybody's houses, so therefore he must be gone. We find out that Sir Henry is starting to fall in love with the exotic beauty, Miss Stapleton. And what's important about this is that you start seeing the idea that Miss Stapleton is a lot different than Mr. Stapleton, or Jack Stapleton. So it's a lot different from her brother. She seems very emotional, while Mr. Stapleton seems very cold and emotionless, or very in control of his emotions. And then Watson begins to explain quite a bit about Mr. Franklin. We find out that Franklin is this kind of kook on the moor who just sues everybody, and he'll take different sides. He'll be on one person's side, and the next day he'll be on somebody else's side. They'll burn him in effigy in one moment, and then they'll carry him on his shoulders in another. And all these litigations have ended up costing him his fortune, and so at some point he's going to be broke and not be able to deal with his hobby or his fun in the sun of suing everybody. Watson is obsessed with this telegram, and so he questions Barrymore about the telegram, and he says, "Did you get the telegram?" He's like, "No, you didn't get the telegram." "Well, was it in your hand? Was it not in your hand?" And Barrymore starts to take offense to this, and so to calm him down, what ends up happening is Sir Henry ends up giving Barrymore his old clothes, because nothing says has hush money written all over it than a box of something from the Goodwill. So Barrymore gets his old clothes, and Sir Henry's old clothes, And then we find out that Barrymore is sneaking out at night. What is up with this Barrymore character? Matter of fact, Watson sneaks around and sees Barrymore looking over at the moor and signaling to somebody with a candle. And so now Barrymore is even more suspicious. First, he doesn't have the telegram. He kind of lies about the telegram. The wife is sobbing all night long. What is going on here? So the second report of Dr. Watson, and keep in mind the reports are going to Sherlock Holmes. He figures out that Barrymore has the best view of the moor when he sneaks out and looks over the moor in this particular spot. And he just figures that he's having an affair with some lass, some farm girl lass. So he's just, hooking up with some young girl and leaving his wife alone and at Baskerville Hall. And this would account for his sneakiness, and this would account for the wife crying all the time. So we start seeing the romance budding between Stapleton, Miss Stapleton rather, and Sir Henry. And Sir Henry says, "Hey, Watson, I know you're supposed to protect me here, but you're kind of a third wheel. I'm trying to hook up with Miss Stapleton here. Don't follow me," kind of thing. So Dr. Watson lets Sir Henry go quite a distance, but he decides to follow him and invade his privacy anyway. And as he's watching him from afar, Sir Henry leans in to kiss the exotic beauty, Miss Stapleton, and all of a sudden Mr. Stapleton runs up upon him, completely loses his mind, starts yelling at Sir Henry. At this point, Sir Henry's like, is he crazy? What is going on here with these Stapletons? And not only that, there didn't seem to be much love talk today between him and Miss Stapleton. So he's wondering why she possibly could refuse him. After all, the Stapletons are a lower class than the Baskervilles, and so why would she refuse his tremendous offer of marriage? And so Stapleton returns eventually and apologizes, says, hey, he would be lost without his sister, and so on and so forth. And so they're buds with him again, and everything seems to be okay. The next part of the report deals with Sir Henry and Watson on a stakeout. And what Sir Henry and Watson do on the stakeout is they try to catch Barrymore signaling to this mystery person out on the moor. And so they catch him eventually, took a couple nights, and they confront him, and they're like, out with it, Barrymore, let's go. What's going on? He absolutely refused to talk. Hey, we're going to fire you if you don't talk. And he's like, I don't care. It's not my secret. I'm not going to say anything. Mrs. Barrymore comes in and she reveals, dun, 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 that the convict is her brother. Selden, the convict, is her brother. And they've been providing him with food and signaling him and so on and so forth. So Watson, and for the good of England, right? Watson and Sir Henry decide to pursue Selden, and they're chasing after him, and all this howling is going on from what we are supposed to believe is the Hound of the Baskervilles. So the supernatural howling is happening. They're chasing this murderer, and they're about to roll up on him and catch him. Watson's going to get his gun ready, and the convict manages to elude them and escape. And as he escapes and they give up pursuit, Watson looks out upon the moor and sees a silhouetted figure, silhouetted against the moon. Dun, dun, dun. Two people out on the moor. One Selden, the convict, and one is this mystery person who has probably been following Watson since London. And so that's kind of what he's thinking at this point. Chapter 10 is an extract from the diary of Dr. Watson. And, in his diary, Watson's writing down, is this supernatural? Is it not supernatural? Again, that idea of logic versus supernatural gets brought up once again. Similarly, what gets brought up in chapter 9 is that idea of classes. And so, Sir Henry is still musing over why Beryl Stapleton or Miss Stapleton didn't marry him. After all, she's of lower class than him. And of course, we see that struggle, that class struggle with the Barrymores as well. So Barrymore is upset with Sir Henry and Watson because they chased Selden. He's like, why the chase? Why did you have to chase him? I was honest with you. And so they assure him, Barrymore rather, assures him that Selden is going to South America and that he's just biding his time out on the moor until he can take a boat down to South America. So they agree, hey, no police. It will save England some money, and he can go ahead and just go down to South America, and it will be our little secret. What this does is it allows Barrymore to be very grateful, and so he gives them a clue. He says that he found a letter that was burnt up in the fireplace, but it had one line left in it, and the letters LL, who he knows is Laura Lyons. And so Laura Lyons is the daughter of Franklin the Crank, the guy who sues everybody, the comic relief of the, and that's the only purpose for Franklin the Crank, is the comic relief of the story. Especially with all the horror and darkness that are in it, he provides a little bit of lightness and some laughs. What we find out also about Laura Lyons is that she was married to an artist who was abusive. Her father didn't approve of it, and she has been abandoned by both her husband and her father, who have left her somewhat penniless. And so we find that part out about Laura Lyons, and what we'll find out is Dr. Watson will go interview her in the next chapter and try to figure out where she fits into this whole mystery. He also reveals, Barrymore also reveals, that Selden has also seen the mysterious silhouetted figure as well on the moor. And so not only do we have a convict out there, but we have a mystery man who might be following or has been following Sir Henry, or spying on Sir Henry, Watson, and perhaps even Sherlock Holmes the entire novel. Chapters 11 and 12 deal with being on the moor. Oh, I noticed I spelled Tor wrong. That's the man on the Tor and death on the moor. You can see why I made that mistake. But this is where all the secrets are revealed. The mystery is for most part over by the time chapters 11 and 12 are over. So chapter 11 begins with Watson paying a visit to Laura Lyons, or LL, on the letter. Initially, she's totally uncooperative. She won't tell him anything, but Watson's like, hey, I can quote your letter, and your initials are signed. She's like, oh, okay, you got me. This might be embarrassing, so I don't want the public to know. And so she starts admitting to things. She says that she wrote him a couple letters, that she has been getting financial support from Sir Charles, and she was supposed to meet him on the night of the murder out in the garden area. She didn't want to meet him at the house because she's a single woman, what people would say, meeting somebody late at night, but she ended up not going to that appointment. She said she didn't go to that appointment because she was getting help from someone else. What did she need help with? She needed help getting out of her bad marriage, i.e. she needed a divorce, and so on and so forth. So it seems pretty plausible, the things that she's saying, but Watson kind of feels like she's holding something back. She's not quite telling him the whole truth, but at least a partial truth. So Watson is determined to find who the silhouetted stranger is out on the moor. And so, on his way to figure that mystery out, he bumps into Mr. Franklin, and Franklin says that he has seen a stranger as well. Franklin invites him over his house. He has a telescope. He says he's seen the convict, who he thinks is the silhouetted stranger, out on the moor. This is a relief to Watson, because he was thinking it was something else. And so anyway, he sees with the telescope, and he sees a boy carrying supplies out towards the Neolithic structures that are probably housing the mysterious person out on the moor. So Watson refuses another drink from Franklin, and he ends up finding the actual hut that this man is hiding in. And he looks at a letter, and it says, "Followed Watson to Laura Lyons," right? Dun, dun, dun. The man's been following him all along. So Watson figures he's going to wait for him, and he gets into the corner of the hut, cocks his revolver, and waits. And he hears footsteps. This is a cliffhanger. What's interesting about Sherlock Holmes is it was written in sections, and it was published in the Strand. And so what would happen is he would write a chapter, and he would kind of leave something suspenseful, so you'd want to buy the next issue, right? So the idea of it's very similar to like a series like Criminal Minds, right? Will have like a cliffhanger at the end. We don't know what's going to happen. We got to wait the whole season, and then dun dun dun, the next issue comes out, and the mystery is revealed. So chapter 12 begins with Watson realizing it's Sherlock Holmes after all. Sherlock Holmes has been hiding out, doing his thing, doing his detective work out on the moor, while Watson has been doing all the bumbling around and so on and so forth. Sherlock Holmes tells Watson that he figured out it was him because he smokes a specific brand of cigarette, and he saw that cigarette sitting there. Watson's feelings are really hurt. Watson is hurt. He's like, "You didn't even read my reports. You're just using me. What's going on?" This seems to be a common theme in Doyle's writing of Holmes, or Sherlock Holmes, outdoing Watson or belittling Watson or making Watson feel stupid. But in this case, Holmes is like, "No, you had very valuable information. Like, I have the letters right here. Good job." Gives him an attaboy. And suddenly Watson's not upset that Holmes has been lying to him all along. So what we find out from Holmes is just a mind blower. The Stapletons are not who they appear to be. The Stapletons are not brother-sister, but husband and wife. So they're not both. So don't think this is some weird some weird thing. They were just posing as brother and sister. Why posing as brother and sister? So Stapleton could seduce Laura Lyons into getting Sir Charles out of the gate, right? So he can murder him, and he's having his wife, Beryl, seduce, by the way, his Costa Rican